Alrighty, let's see if we can get this show on the road.
Get everyone out of the waiting room and here into the session with us. It always takes just a minute to get everyone here. So, welcome. Welcome. Really appreciate you taking the time to come spend it with me as we talk through some of your NPTE essentials. We'll be talking about the exam blueprint, kind of kick off our VIP class. I know a lot of you who are here today are already a part of the VIP class. We want to welcome you to the class. We'll talk about that and answer any questions you have about the class as we get going here today. In any case, hope you're having a fabulous day. Appreciate you taking the time to come and spend with me. So as you get tuned in, if you wouldn't mind, just head over to that chat box and give me a quick sound and video check. Make sure we're broadcasting loud and clear. Make sure I've got the right microphone tuned up and ready to go. So, and also, if you'd like to have access to the session notes for today, let me go ahead and share those session notes over in the chat box. I've got those in a shared folder as well. So where you found today's webinar, just go right up to the very top. You'll see a folder that's filled, or it says find session notes here. You'll be able to find those there as well. So I did just post over in the chat box the session notes if you'd like to take advantage of those as we go through things. But let's go ahead and get started. So lots of good stuff to talk about today. The goal is to talk about the exam blueprint, specifically how the exam is created, what the score is, what you need to do, and hopefully that helps craft a lot of your study strategy. Now, we'll talk a lot about study strategy in the class, specifically what to do to make things stick long term. I actually have quite a series of material that can be very helpful as you're trying to get all of this complex and very significant amount of content to stick so that you're ready for test day. We'll talk a lot about how to apply that to test questions. And in fact, most of our live time together will be spent dissecting out practice questions, making sure that you're clear not only on the content, but the strategy. I want to spend a ton of time on strategy for the exam. So let's go ahead and get started with a bunch of this great content. Just a quick introduction though. My name is Will. So a lot of you either know me or are a part of the class already. But in any case, just a quick reintroduction. I graduated in 2011 from PT school and I started PT final exam in 2012. So I've been training students to pass the exam for over a decade now. I've got 4 kids. I live in Idaho and I currently practice as a physical therapist. So I continue to be licensed. I continue to take patients, and I feel like that's such an important part about therapy is not only the content knowledge, but also that clinical knowledge that helps you to apply it to patient cases, have familiarity not only with the documentation, but also just the flow of the interdisciplinary team. So that's something that I continue to do. And like I said, I live in Idaho, so it's we're just coming into wintertime here. So looking forward to some snowstorms coming. I know a lot of you live in colder parts of the country. Some of you live in warmer parts of the country. In any case, that's where I live in the great state of Idaho, about 100 miles south of Yellowstone Park, 150 miles directly south. So kind of in that neck of the woods, if any of you have ever headed out west to see the Grand Teton or Yellowstone National Park. So let's go ahead and talk about today, though. Just a quick reminder, though, there is a free podcast. If you want to take advantage of the podcast, we go through a practice question in each of these sessions. And the goal with the podcast is to try to, again, get you some content while you're on the road. Maybe you're exercising, whatever it is. It's just a great way to work through content while you're doing something else. So kind of what I call that found time. And so that's the goal with the podcast. I hope you take advantage of that. As far as our goal today, we'll talk about the exam blueprint, the development of the questions, how the exam comes about. And then I want to talk about study strategies and then do some practice questions together. So I think you'll enjoy that as we go through all of it on our way through the exam. So just of note, changes that affected the exam as of 2024. Those of you who are here today, you'll be taking the test in 2025 and beyond. So these changes are very much in effect for you. In fact, they don't change the exam, but every about 5 years. So 2024 was the last biggest exam update. That will remain in effect at least until 2029. The biggest change that you'll see on your test are these scenario-based items. And we'll talk about that. We've got a bunch of examples that we'll do in the class as we go through, but these scenario-based items, they are meant to have a patient chart and you answer questions about that patient chart. So you'll see a patient chart pop up in front of you. You'll have to read through those, make sure that you are seeing what you need to see, and then they'll ask questions about that. There's a question that comes across the chat box. Is there a handout for today? Yes. So over in the chat box, I've got the download link if you'd like to download today's session notes. Those of you who are already a part of the class, you can find it up at the top of that live webinars page where you found the link to today's session. And if you wouldn't mind helping me out, if anyone else comes in, just share that link to anyone who'd like it, and be sure to get everyone the slide notes. So on test day, you can expect about 45 unscored items. We've got 45 scenario-based items. So they're not the same thing. 45 unscored items, but it also happens to be up to about 45 scenario-based items for a grand total of 180 items that are scored, with 225 if you include those unscored items. And I'll talk about all that here in just a moment. There will also be some video, graphic, and text-based questions. So several styles of question on the test. And again, I want you to be prepared for all of them. So on test day, here is the content outline. This is the material that is going to be tested. And the reason that I like to show this and show this often is that it shows you what the precise proportions are for each of these systems, especially those big three systems, cardio, muscular, and neuro. They have about 75% of the tests. So it's a huge part of the exam, definitely worth spending most of your time in the big three systems. Now, these other systems are certainly important, and the questions are worth the same. So the weight of the question is the same. However, there's just not as many of them. So that's why you'll want to spend a little less time in genitourinary, gastrointestinal. Also important, but not to the same proportion or quantity of cardio, musculo, and neuro. And then on to the non-systems. So the non-systems, a lot of people get a lot of heartburn about the non-systems, and that's for good reason because it's quite a variety of content. But that's, again, stuff that we go over in the class, but it goes through all of the different little subcategories of non-systems. So equipment, devices, modalities, safety, protection, professional responsibilities, and then everyone's most favorite, research and evidence-based practice. But I'll just point out to you, there are only somewhere between 3 and 5 questions in research and evidence-based practice. So not a huge proportion of the questions, but they are important, and we will talk about those. So other things, just kind of lining it out, showing you what the exam looks like. So again, 225 items total, 180 of those are scored, 45 unscored items. The test costs quite a bit, so $485 for the test. Quite significant. Prometric fee about $100 plus whatever your state licensure fee is. So all told, I mean, you're into this almost $700 by the time you get through all of this. Point is, you'll want to do it just once. So as best you can, try to get through it in the fewest attempts possible because it gets pretty pricey. But the point is that it is something that you can do, something you've been trained to do. And now our goal here is to talk through the content that will be most helpful to you as you go through the exam. In case you're curious how they decided to create that proportion of questions, it really boils down to a practice analysis. They look at the number of people in the country practicing, and they ask them, and they take a wide survey. They ask them what a first-year entry-level PT needs in order to practice in the U.S. today. And so then that reflects nicely into not just reflects into the content outlines. Basically, you see the content outlines reflective of what a first-year clinician will encounter as a new PT in the United States. And then finally, the content outlines, they come from textbooks. So all of your core questions are coming from the textbooks that are used by programs across the United States. So again, you have the source material from textbooks, and then the practice analysis is what determines the proportion of questions basically looking at what entry-level PTs need to know. So what is actually on the exam? Well, it's just entry-level content that you will encounter as a first-year entry-level PT in the United States. So entry-level content plus has to be current content contained within recently published textbooks. So not research articles, not clinical practice guidelines. Rather, they're looking at recently published textbooks as the primary reference for these questions. So that's the key there, is that's where the questions or what's actually on the exam. Now, talking about the development of the exam, I think this is interesting. It takes about 2 years for a question, a draft item, to become an item on your test. So it goes through quite an extensive review process. So the questions are first first created their first draft by quite a diverse set of item writers. These are volunteer item writers across the United States that develop the first draft of every question. And these questions are taken straight out of the textbook. When they write these questions, they have to have the textbook open and are looking at the content contained, right there in the paragraphs of the textbook. And then it takes about 8 different committees that edit and stylize the question to make sure that it's clear, that the construction is uniform, that there's not anything weird about the question. They want to make sure that it's very clear and concise. And then it eventually shows up as what's called a pretest unscored item on the exam. So those are those unscored items. These are pretest items, ones that you have to take, and they validate the questions based on your performance on these questions. So you get to be the unwitting guinea pig to make sure that each question is valid. They want to see if people who get the question right pass the test, people who get the questions wrong fail the test. And so that's how they analyze whether a question is a good question or not. And so then that's all grouped together. They take all these questions finally, and they group them into blocks of questions. So 180 blocks or 180 question blocks that you take on test day. So 180 questions that are scored, plus the 45 pretest items for that grand total of 225. Now, what's also interesting to me is they're creating lots and lots of questions. On test day, there's somewhere between 5 and 10 different forms of the test. So what does that mean? That means that if you're sitting next to your best friend taking the test, you will take 2 entirely different forms of the test. And again, that's all in an effort to prevent cheating. They want to make sure that you're not sharing or communicating with anyone else, that you are just taking one of these random exam forms on test day. Each form is then validated by comparing it to previously taken tests, and then that's how they determine the score. And we'll talk about score here in just a moment. But in any case, each item, this is also interesting to me, each item is only used once or twice before it's retired forever. And so therefore, again, in an effort to prevent cheating, they're creating lots and lots of questions. That's why they have to have these pretest items that show up on your exam so that so you can validate it for them. And so this should be a big question for you. You should say, well, Will, how do I tell the unscored items from the scored items? And the short answer is you can't. You can't tell an unscored versus a scored item. They are randomly distributed throughout the entirety of the test, because I've had people who they say so sincerely, they say, hey, Will, I'm pretty sure the whole last section was unscored items. And that's simply not the case. They randomly distribute them evenly throughout each of the 5 sections. And so you just take every question as if it's a scored one. You just take it and get the right answer on every single one, even though those unscored items, those pretest items, don't count towards your score. All right, we've already talked about this, the exam structure. I want to talk about just PT versus PTA. So there are 225 items on the PT exam for 5 sections. The PTA, I know we usually get a few folks that are PTAs coming through the class. Just want to mention, this is all subtracted down by 1 section for the PTA exam. We'll focus in on the PT sections, but if there are any specific questions, please let me know. But 225 items for 5 sections. You get 5 hours to take the test. So you can use those 5 hours as you wish. You can take it slowly, you can take it quickly. However you want to use those 5 hours, that's okay, except that you must finish within that 5-hour time bank. So ideally, you'll go at least 1 hour or less per section as a target pace. Now, you don't have to stay exactly on that pace. You can use a little more on some and a little less on the other. But in order to stay consistent on the exam, you'll go about 1 hour per section for the 5 sections. Each section has 45 questions and acts like a distinct mini test, because once you submit the section, you cannot return to that section again. And the reason they do that is because you get what's called a scheduled break after section 2. So that's a scheduled break. It's a time when you get a mini timer for 15 minutes. But you are permitted to take what are called unscheduled breaks between any of the other sections or any of the other section breaks. And the reason that's important is because if you have an emergency bathroom break or something's going on, you can take a quick break and then come back to the test. But again, just remember that time is subtracted, that the clock does not stop for those unscheduled breaks. So it's what I consider the emergency bathroom break. So you'll see that clock, running clock in the window. You'll know exactly how much time you've used. You'll be able to be very clear on what time and how much time you have. So with that, that's the exam time. Again, I recommend about, if you look at the averages, it's about 80 seconds per item. But recognize that most items are not going to take you 80 seconds. So you should target about 60 seconds or less per item. And that's critical because if you take more than that, then you'll run out of time on test day. And you don't want to do that. As you navigate through the test, you can strike through items, you can mark items. There's a lot of navigational tools for you. Striking through just permits you to strike through an answer option. It doesn't change your score in any way. It's just for your benefit. Same thing with marking questions. If you want to mark a question for your own review to say, hey, I want to come back and look at that, you can. But just remember, if you spend so much time with those navigational tools, you'll run out of time to actually take the questions. So I say strike through or mark just judiciously, just do it wisely. Make sure you stay on pace, about 1 hour per section or 30 minutes per half section. You also get what's called a brain dump or a scratch pad. And we'll talk about that actually the week of the test. We'll do a special session just for what to put on that brain dump, acronyms, mnemonics. It's usually a fun little, it's a scratch pad. You can write on it, draw on it, whatever you want. But you don't have a ton of time, so it has to be very brief. So you put down, again, like when I took the test, I put the acronym for cranial nerves. So I made sure that I knew exactly which cranial nerve was which because I had it all written down, at least the first letter of every cranial nerve, so that it was very clear to me. So that's an example of what you could put on the brain dump. Now to the all-important exam scoring. So on test day, you have to have a 600 out of 800 scale score to pass the exam. So what does that mean? A 600 out of 800 scale score, well, that means you have to get about 70% correct. Now you're probably looking at the math and you're saying, well, Will, isn't that more like 75%? The answer is no. That the raw score is around 70% in order to pass the exam. And the reason they do that scale score is because they're really interested in how people are performing in the middle of the test. They actually don't care very much if you get like if you get an A on the test, 92% or above, then they give you a perfect score. They just say, okay, that's an 800. If you do very, very poorly, they go ahead and give you the 400 lowest score. So all that to hone in and really zoom in on that 600 out of 800. And so the raw score tends to be about 70%, 68 to 70% as a good target. Now it is slightly variable. That's another reason for the scale score is that there are 10 different forms of the test on exam day. So therefore, to equilibrate the attempts, to make sure that every exam is scored equally, they use this scale scoring because some tests are a little more difficult, some tests are a little easier, and so you'll have to score a little bit higher raw score on an easy test and a little bit lower raw score on a hard test, all that to get you that scale score 600 out of 800. It is indeed the same for every jurisdiction, so it doesn't matter where you sit for the test. It's done automatically, electronically. There's no external bias. Just it's a multiple choice test. They just kick it into the computer system. It spits out a score. However, you don't get your score until a week later, and that's just to give a little extra time in case someone's test center had an incident or a winter storm or something that occurred that delayed their test. It gives them a couple of days of leeway to get the person into a test center and get their exam taken care of. Like there was a big hurricane earlier this year that hit the Texas area, and it closed down a lot of test centers on test day, and so it made a lot of folks have to reschedule their exam. Remember, there's no penalty for guessing, so you'll want to put down your very best answer and move on. You just want your very, very, very best guess on every question. So let's talk about some of the myths on test day. There are a few myths that exist, and these ones, I've added to this a little bit in recent days. I'll show you what I'm talking about. But there's a couple of myths that exist, and one of them is that the test is harder in July or easier in January. Now, the truth is that more people do fail in July and fewer people fail in January. Now, why is that? Well, it's because fewer people take the test in January and more people take the test in July. And that just means that the proportion stays the same, but the actual number of people increases for those July test administrations. So it makes no difference whether you're testing in July or January or April or October. The test will be exactly equal in each of those instances. We already talked about what the 800 out of 800 means. 800 is only a 92%. So if you get an A on this test, you'll get a perfect score. And I expect most of you here to be getting perfect scores, just so you know. So we'll plan on that, getting you a perfect score on the test. Are there multiple correct answers to each question? The short answer is no. Long answer is kind of. Multiple correct answers, meaning usually it boils down to this. There's one that you would do first or is the most direct, and then something you would do later would be another answer option. So as an example, let's say someone is in your clinic for a shoulder evaluation. One of the answer options, what do you do next? One of the answer options is get a prior level of function from the patient. And another answer option is Codman pendulum exercises. And you'll say, all right, well, you finish your exam first, so get your prior level of function first before advancing to intervention. And that's an example of making sure that you have the right order of operations for exam day. Is the FSBPT out of touch with reality? Are they just making up the worst questions possible? The answer is no. I mean, not to go to bat for FSBPT, but the questions are written by not by a boardroom full of executives. Rather, the questions are written by physical therapists in the United States as a first draft. And so it's meant to be reflective of what you'll encounter as a first-year PT. So I guess that being said, it has a lot of bearing on your practice, and so definitely worth knowing the content here. This was the new one here in recent months. Are some questions worth more than others? Like I had a student ask, hey, I've heard that if you fail or if you miss all of the safety questions, that they'll automatically fail you. And the answer is no, that each question is exactly worth every other question. Now, I anticipate you'll get all of the safety ones right. There's no reason not to. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. You just need to get at least that 68 to 70% of questions correct in order to pass the test to get that 600 scale score. And then finally, the last one, is the test academic or is the test clinical? There are some people who argue, oh, this is one of those academic tests. I know what to do clinically, but I have a hard time with that academic test. And the truth is that every question is written in a clinical type setting, so with a patient or a case. So in that sense, it is clinical, but it's an application of your academic principles to those cases, to those clinical cases. And so it's a combination of both academic and clinical to make that perfect intersection, that Venn diagram between academic principles to clinical patients. So as far as how to prepare for the test, here's just a brief review of some of the things you need to do to prepare for the test. So highest on the list, if we're talking about evidence-based study strategies, you'll find that 2 to 4 hours most days is a pretty good starting point. Now, it could be a little bit higher for some of you if you graduated a long time ago, or if you don't remember a lot of things from your PT schooling. It may be much more necessary to study more in the 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 hour range, but this is a good starting point. 2 to 4 hours most days on a consistent basis is a really good starting point as far as the quantity of content you need to go over. And then as far as what that time frame looks like, as an example, your productivity, that's what's shown on the y-axis here, your productivity drops off sharply after about 1 hour. So what does that mean? It just means that you're not nearly as productive. You're not remembering things if you hit the books, pour over the books, and then do nothing else. But if you take frequent breaks and refresh yourself, you'll find that your productivity can stay quite high. And that's the most critical part of a good study session, is making sure that you keep your productivity very, very high. By so doing, you'll find that you don't require quite as much quantity of time because you have a higher quality of time. And I'm all about study quality, maybe not totally over study quantity, but you do want to make sure that you're spending not only a proper quantity of time, but it needs to be really good quality of time. Because I've had people who say, hey, Will, I study for 12 hours a day and I still failed the test. And it's like, all right, well, what did you remember? 12 hours of study, like, was that a highly productive 12-hour session, or was it a low productivity rate? And if it was low, how can you get your productivity to come back up again? And so try to do things like this. Take frequent study breaks, change activity. So switch from like a video-based content to a text-based content, or from text to practice questions. Something to keep you sharp and engaged with the content rather than letting it disappear. As far as other evidence-based study strategies, there's nothing that compensates for high-quality practice questions, low-stakes quizzing. So lots and lots and lots of practice questions and low-stakes quizzing. This is critical to your success because it forces you to encounter lots and lots of various questions, content, ideas, and it'll show you what you don't know and help you to understand what you need to study. So it shows gaps in your knowledge, which will then benefit you in your study plan. So the best thing to do with a practice question is to take it, see if you can get it right. If you can't, understand why you got it wrong and understand enough of the content so that you'll never get it wrong in the future. So it's not just recognition, but it's an understanding of that content. And that's why those PEATs are such a great resource. Any of you who've already got the PEATs, you know this, that those PEAT exams, they are for purchase from the FSPPT, but they are retired exams. I mean, these are actual exam questions. There's a retired form and an academic form. They're created the exact same way. They have the same structure and style. I think you'll find that they are very, very, very beneficial to you as a student. So taking those PEAT exams is extremely beneficial. So I very much recommend that if you haven't already. As a part of the class that you're a part of here, the VIP class, we have 6 practice exams that you'll have access to. So you can build quizzes in that. It's really, really handy. So you can take large sets of questions or short sets of questions or any variety of questions. You can randomize it. You can categorize it. Just whatever works best for you. But that's what's nice about having lots of questions is that you can, it'll take you quite some time to go through them all, but it'll show you lots and lots and lots of content. So frequent low stakes quizzing, highest on the list for evidence-based study strategy. Variability and distributed practice is also critical. This is where if you study an item, so you studied on day 1, you come back to it on maybe day 3 and look at it again, and then maybe again on day 5 or 7. What you're doing is you are refreshing your memory about the thing that you studied the first day. So you're not letting it disappear because the evidence suggests that it takes somewhere between 8 and 30 repetitions to remember something in your long-term memory banks. So that's why it just takes lots and lots and lots of reps to get it to stick long-term. So you just got to know it. You got to look at it. You got to work with it. As best you can, you try to gain that mastery of the content with repetition. So what doesn't work? Osmosis doesn't work. Just rereading, rewriting, massed practice where you just pound, 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 and then never come back and look at it again. That just doesn't work very well. What does work is if you review the content, come back to it frequently. That's that distributed practice. That's a principle of motor control as well. You'll get better long-term memory on complex tasks if you increase or have time between practice sessions. And that's the same thing for you in your studies as well. Randomized practice, especially as you get closer to test day, try to randomize as best you can. Practice testing, so at least I like to say take at least 4 full practice tests in a test environment. That if you can take at least 4 in a four full tests in a practice environment, that's the minimum to work from because it shows you not only a score prediction, it shows you how to stay concentrated for a full 5 hours. And then, but the final thing it does is that it shows you what content you're still struggling with. So that practice testing can be extremely, extremely helpful. High density, high yield studying, we've talked about that. Study with a goal. What are you going to master today? So not just what will you recognize today, what will you master today? And finally, take good care of yourself. Make sure that you are having adequate nutrition, adequate exercise, outdoor time, family time, all of the things. Being well balanced, you'll find that it helps you create a much better plan. So making your plan, have a map, so a calendar showing how much time you have. And then as best you can, you try to plug in chunks of study time into each of your available study days. So some of you are working, maybe you have a lot of, maybe you're on a challenging clinical, whatever it is, you probably only have a limited chunk of time available to study. So try to plug chunks of material into that time. So it means that maybe Tuesday is musculoskeletal day for you. You're going to spend a lot of time on MSK. As a part of the class, we're going to go through each system. So next week, we'll really hit the musculoskeletal system with the goal being to go through the recorded material plus our live sessions as a part of the musculoskeletal system, going through practice questions together, In addition to that, I've got a workbook for you that it'll take you through additional content that maybe we didn't talk about in the sessions, but it's still likely to be tested. Trying to help you have multiple avenues for learning and retaining the content. And you'll find that that really helps in improving your weakest areas. Again, studying with the goal to master content, frequently coming back to review material that you've seen before, just making sure that it sticks long term. That's the real key. So I've got some practice questions for you, but I want to know if there are questions that you'd like me to answer here today. I know that there's usually a few questions, so I want to make sure that if you do have a question, go ahead and either queue it up in the Q&A feature or in the chat box. I'll try to give you plenty of time for that. While you're queuing up questions for me, and I do have some practice questions we're going to do together, I just wanted to mention the VIP class. So my VIPTs, this is a 10-week class. We're going to go all the way till the exam administration in January, and then we repeat it again each quarter. But we're going to go through all the content you need to pass the exam. Musculo, cardio, neuro. We're going to go through, we've got live sessions. We've got video recorded sessions. So we've got a video library. We've got live sessions. We've got 6 practice exams with a quiz builder. We've got written material you can access and download as well. All of this in addition to one-on-one calls where we can talk through study strategy, we can talk through content, go through practice questions, whatever it is that's most helpful to you. And all of that, you get a 12-month access period. So if you're planning on studying the test or taking the test in the spring or summer, it's super, super helpful to be able to access this sooner rather than later. It gets you the best bang for your buck. All that's the VIPT course. And that's what we're starting. So this week is all about intro and understanding the FSBPT content outline. Next week is all content. We're just going to dive right into MSK content, really prioritize those big 3 systems. Additionally, you have access to the crash course. So that's complimentary. You get access to our crash course where we go through the big 3 systems another time right before exam day. So that's super helpful as well. So there's lots and lots that we'll go through as a part of the class. All that's included in the VIP class. And I'm always, this is the most fun I have, is going through this VIP class because we get the opportunity to answer everyone's questions. We talk through the material. Sometimes I get a real stumper where I don't know the answer to the question. So we have to take it back to hit the books. I've got quite a vast library of books that we hit the books. We may try to make sure that we're talking about the content in the most up-to-date and accurate fashion possible. Let's see, question comes across. Tristan says, do you recommend reviewing right after we study or take a break and then review the material? So Tristan, it's probably an and question. Yes, you can spend a few minutes right after you study to review it. So like 5 minutes at the end of every study session, just for a very brief review. Doing it the next day is really helpful. So maybe 15 minutes the next day to just go through one more time. And just what you're doing is you're adding repetitions in your mind to what you just saw. So it keeps it fresh. And so you look at it, all right, 15 minutes on day 2. And then the next few days, or maybe even the next week, you spend another 15 minutes reviewing it again, saying, or even just 5 minutes, look at it and say, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember looking at that. Okay, refreshed, got it, no problem. And you do that frequently over time, and you'll find you don't have to do it quite as frequently as you become more and more a master of it. And it just helps to refresh it. Again, it takes about somewhere between 8 and 30 reps to get it stick long term. So back to your original question, do you recommend reviewing material right after we study or take a break and then review? I'd probably take either a little break or do it the next day. I probably would be less likely to do it right after, like that last moment. Or not last moment, but like, let's say you study for 2 hours in the evening. I would spend a few minutes the next morning. Like I wouldn't spend a lot of time doing review that night. Rather, I would hit it again the next morning to make sure that it didn't disappear. Claire says, do any of these study strategies change if you have recently taken an actual NPT and did not pass? So Claire, the only thing I change for that case, so that let's say you had a recently failed attempt and you're retaking the exam, chances are you have a really firm grasp of most of the content that almost everyone I talk to, in fact, I can't think the last time. It's been a while since I've talked to someone who really, really bombed the tests, like so bad that they need to go back to PT school. Rather, most of the time, people have a really firm grasp of most of the content. And so if you've already seen the test and you've had a pretty solid study strategy to this point, the only thing I would add in that case is that I would bias your studies to include more practice questions rather than fewer. So as an example, let's say that you, I don't know, I guess two things. Number one, you self-identify weak areas that you encountered on the test. So chances are you can remember and say, I wish I had studied, I don't know, cerebral palsy a little bit more, or I wish I had studied spinal muscular atrophy one more time. Whatever it is in your mind. Okay, so you have that topic in your mind. That will be a priority for you this time. So you've got a priority list of content that you know you need to spend time on. The other thing that you absolutely need to spend time on, and more time on, I should say, are frequent, shorter sets of questions. So it's almost like every day is a very question-centric study session. So let's say you take 5 practice questions every day and you miss one of them or 2 of them. Well, that prompts another hour of study right there. Like, all right, I got to know those 1 or 2 items. I'm going to make sure I don't forget anything about that. And maybe you have time to repeat it again. But the point is that it's very question centric. So, especially if you've had a previous failed attempt, I would add a few more practice questions, but I really wouldn't vary things too much that you'll still spend most of your time. uh, We remember things that we see and hear and write or interact with. So that's why video content is super helpful. Webinar, live content, being here with me is super helpful. Writing out flashcards is super helpful. Trying to put it in your own words. All of that is part of your evidence-based study strategies to make sure it sticks. So I guess back to your question, Claire, do any of these strategies change if you have a recently failed attempt? They don't change much, but the big change would probably be to add a few more practice questions each day just to make sure you're solid there. All right, let's go ahead and queue up our first practice question we'll do here together. So what you'll see here is a poll box jump up in front of you. So if you don't mind, go ahead and select your answer, click it into the poll box. I'll be quiet while you respond, give you about a minute on this, and then we'll talk about it together. Ready, set, and go. All right, just a few more moments. All right, end time. So we got, while examining a child with muscular torticollis, which of the following cranial nerves is most likely to be implicated as the cause of the torticollis? So we have a child with muscular torticollis. Which of the following cranial nerves most likely to be implicated? Now, torticollis, we know, is tightening of a sternocleidomastoid. So chances are a lot of you probably, just by raise of hands, how many of you looked at this question and did not, you wished that cranial nerve 11 was on the list? You would have said, all right, yeah, sternocleidomastoid, cranial nerve 11. Okay, that makes sense. And you're not wrong. Cranial nerve 11 does indeed innervate the sternocleidomastoid. But here we're looking for a cause. What would cause a child to turn their neck, or what would be implicated in a turning of the neck? Now, the truth is that any of the visual cranial nerves are likely to cause double vision, and so the child can develop a skewed neck or a with double vision. They can get a torticollis because they're turning their head to try to focus a little bit better. So you'll see this in relationship to especially like cranial nerve 4, cranial nerve 3, maybe a little less cranial nerve 2 and 6. But anytime you have double vision, the child will try to compensate by turning their head so they look out of really just one eye, and especially cranial nerve number 4. But all of these would likely result in a muscular torticollis. And remember, torticollis is named for the tightened sternocleidomastoid. So in this case, like if it was a right sternocleidomastoid that was tight, or that would be right torticollis, the child would be turned away from the offending sternocleidomastoid. They'd be side bent towards and rotated away because that's the function of the sternocleidomastoid. So that was a tricky one. Definitely wanted to make sure to mention that one, just because that's an example of the depth of content you got to know on testing. You got to know not just what the cranial nerves do, but what would happen if one of them went wrong or something went wrong with the cranial nerves. So let's go ahead and queue up our next one here. I've got let's see, a couple more questions. We'll see if we can get through these. We should have time for all these. So queue up our next one. Give you about a minute so you'll see the poll box jump up in front of you again. I'll be quiet while you respond. Ready, set, and go. All right, just another moment. So here we've got a physical therapist monitoring the exercise of a patient who has type 1 diabetes. Which of the following blood glucose levels would be best for safe exercise? So most of you saw through this one that mid-range 180, this is in the safe zone between 100 and 250 is considered safe. Anything below 100, you'd need to administer glucose before beginning exercise. So a good carbohydrate snack would be helpful. Retest after 15 minutes, see if they're back up into that safe range. If it's above 250, then exercise would not be indicated because they are a little bit too high. They need to come back down. The likelihood of diabetic ketoacidosis is very high, especially above 250 and certainly above 300. It's almost guaranteed at that point. So your safe blood glucose level is between 100 and 250 for casual blood glucose. So casual blood glucose. Now, usually if you're on looking at fasting glucose, usually you're looking at below 120 or below 100. But that would be just fasting glucose and not relevant to exercise specifically. This is asking about the therapist is currently monitoring the exercise of a patient. Which of the following blood glucose levels would be best for safe exercise? And that mid-range between 100 and 250 is the target. Excellent. All right, queue up our next one. I've got two more. I think we've got time to go through these. Yeah, may as well hit them. All right, give you about a minute on this one. You'll see a poll box if you don't mind. I'll be quiet while you respond. Ready, set, and go. All right, just a few more moments. All right, a patient sustained a mid-shaft humeral fracture 8 weeks ago, receiving PT for upper extremity strengthening as a result of the nerve damage due to the fracture. Which of the following muscles is least likely to have impaired strength? So really, we've got nerve damage related to a mid-shaft humeral fracture. Which of the following is the least likely to have impaired strength? Well, we know that the radial nerve is the most likely nerve damaged with a mid-shaft humeral fracture, and that's because the radial nerve is like attached to the humerus right here in the middle. So if you had a radial nerve injury, what muscles will be impaired? And this one even says which is least likely to be impaired. Well, looking at this, we see that the flexor pollicis longus is innervated by the median nerve and is not likely to be implicated in the case of a radial nerve deficit. So the way I remember this is that the radial nerve is a beast. So the acronym stands for the abductor pollicis longus, abductor pollicis longus, the brachioradialis, the extensors, the anconius, and not spelling very well today, anconius, the supinator, and the triceps. So these are the muscles innervated by the radial nerve. It is a beast. Abductor pollicis longus, brachioradialis. The way I remember that is that the name radial shows up in brachioradialis. All the extensors, anything that starts with extensor, anconius, supinator, and triceps. So we see that the anconius, supinator, and brachioradialis all show up on this list. They're innervated by the radial nerve. And so leaving us with our outlier here, the flexor pollicis longus, which is innervated by the median nerve. And I've got more tips and tricks about nerves. We can talk about that certainly as we get into Neuro Week here in a couple of weeks, but we'll talk about some of the fun ways to remember all that so that you can actually get it to stick on test day, because let's be honest, there's a lot of material. And so the goal is to get it to stick as quickly and efficiently as possible. All right, so one more question here. Cue this one up and then we'll talk about it as we come to a conclusion. This is also a great time if you have more questions for me. Go ahead and start clicking those in so that I can go through that. Or if you need your mic turned on so you can ask a question, that's also okay. Just let me know. But in any case, I'll be quiet while you respond. Ready, set, and go. All right, just a few more moments. All right, so this one, again, just by show of hands, how many of you have never heard the term neuralgia paresthetica? If you're like me, made it through PT school, and I don't think I ever heard that term. Neuralgia paresthetica is when you have compression of the lateral cutaneous femoral nerve. And so if you look at this question, you're saying to yourself, all right, how do I answer this question? I'm not sure about. At the very least, you can see paresthesia in this, the paresthetica. And I would argue that most of our paresthesias are quite distal, that we typically don't hear of proximal paresthesias. So I'd probably be able to rule out the low back, just again, trying to think of things from a broad perspective. So neuralgia paresthetica, it is by definition compression of the lateral cutaneous femoral nerve of the thigh, the LCFN. But if at the very least, you should be able to narrow it down to the distal segments here. We got medial or lateral thigh. And it's very infrequent that we would have a medial thigh issue. Now, it is possible. I mean, it is absolutely possible to have some paresthesia on medial thigh, especially if you had like an L1 issue or something up near the hip crease or groin. It is possible to have a medial thigh issue. More likely, though, much, much more likely, would be the lateral and distal segments. Again, that's where paresthesias tend to show up a little bit more. So if it was a straight up guess, you'd hopefully would be taken more towards the lateral thigh. But if you know, then neuralgia paresthetica is indeed an LCFN nerve compression, very often from standing too long. It could be from tight clothing, something that is compressing that nerve, which results in pain and paresthesia on the lateral thigh. So that would be the definition of neuralgia paresthetica. Again, kind of one of those outlier things but it could show up on the exam. It's in the textbook, absolutely there. It's related to the terminal branches of the nerves. Absolutely important there. I just talked to actually a student who had a patient with LCFN issues with neuralgia paresthetica right then. So it's something that you might encounter as a therapist. It's something that's in the book and is an example of what could be tested on test day. Excellent. All right. So as we conclude here today, just what questions do you have? What questions do you have for me? Just one more last little thought about the VIP course. So this is one that I personally run. It's very robust in the content. I think you'll find if you stack it up against any of the other courses out there, at least double, if not triple, the amount of content. We've got lots and lots of live sessions. We try to be really efficient in the content as well. So there's an efficiency, there's a breadth and scope of content. Recently updated, lots and lots of recently updated content there as well. 6 full practice exams, again, stacking that up against anything else out there. I think you'll be very, very pleased with that. So all that content, plus you get the one-on-one calls you get those with me, and it's, I guess, for better or for worse, I've been doing this for a while, and so I feel like I've got a wealth of knowledge to share with you to help you as you prepare, plan, and then actually execute your plan for test day. And in addition, you get 12 months of access. So if you sign up sooner, you get access to all the course content between now and whenever you test. Try to make it as beneficial as possible. So yeah, what questions do you all have for me? Just a reminder, as we're coming to a conclusion here, you're coming to the last questions for me. We'll have another session here on Wednesday. So in 2 days, we'll have another session dedicated entirely to multiple choice question strategies. How to answer questions if you don't know the answers, how to answer questions correctly. If you do kind of know the answer, try to find how to best strategize these multiple choice questions to make sure that you get each of them correct on test day. Again, I expect many of you who are here today to get a perfect score on exam day. I very much expect that. It happens pretty frequently, a lot more frequently than you'd think. And again, it's just it's all just going through the content, making sure you have a firm grasp of the content, you've got the right strategies so that you don't crash and burn on test day, and then working your way through it sequentially. Excellent. So like I said, we'll meet up again on Wednesday. That'll be for a multiple choice question strategy session. And then next week, we're going to really dive into the VIP class. We'll go into the musculoskeletal section, on to neuro, cardio. We'll meet weekly as we go through all that content, making sure that it's all solid in your mind and ready to go. Let's see. Question comes across. Claire says, just wondering for scheduling around the course, are the sessions typically an hour? They're usually 60 to 90 is kind of a window that we target. So yes, from a scheduling perspective, I really try not to go over 90. I know that sometimes questions can push me that direction. I would say our average is 70 to 80 minutes. Again, somewhat dependent on questions, some a little shorter, some a little longer, but I really try not to exceed that 90-minute mark. And frankly, that's for 2 reasons. Number one, I feel like just for productivity, from a productivity standpoint, we stay more productive for about an hour or so. And then for your planning purposes, try to make sure that you can plan your kind of that balance between your other obligations as well as this class. Like I have a lot of people who have to take this class like on a break, or they take it, try to get their work schedule to work around the regularly scheduled classes. So 90 minutes tops, 60 to 90 is the target. Excellent. All right. Well, with that, we'll bring today to a conclusion. You can always message me directly. So as a part of the VIP class, we have a private Telegram group, so you can message me privately over there if you wish. Again, try to be as responsive as I can over there. In the meantime, though, I do hope to see you here in a couple of days at our multiple choice question strategy session, and then on through the VIP class as we continue. So in the meantime, take good care of yourselves today. I hope you have a fabulous day. Will Crane fist pumps all around. Keep a grin on your chin, and I'll talk to you here in a couple of days. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.